You're listening to Counselors on the Couch, an open conversation between counselors, coaches, and specialists discussing how people just like you can solve a multitude of challenges. Counselors on the Couch is hosted by Dr. Chuck Carrington. We invite you now to join us on the couch to listen in as Dr. Chuck and his specialist guests and experts candidly share insider information on how they help solve the problems that drive people into counseling.
Evening, everyone. How's everybody doing? Awesome. Well, welcome to the first of many marriage enhancement seminars, all sponsored by Connect Christian Family Ministry. My name is Brenda Cooper, and I am pleased to welcome all of you here this evening and welcome our guest speaker. Tonight, we are all here to learn more about what it means to have a chosen marriage. Over the next 60 minutes, all of us will be invited to explore just how to define and redefine our marriage culture in order to produce a true masterpiece the way that our Lord God created it to be. So as you listen, please feel free to jot down any questions because at the conclusion of this presentation, we will have a brief Q&A session. So this evening, I have the distinct honor of introducing our speaker for this chosen marriage seminar. He is the founder of Connect Christian Family Counseling, and he is simply passionate about helping marriages improve and survive. With decades of counseling experience that involves thousands of hours spent with couples and individuals, he specializes in the area of relationships, particularly Christian marriages and recovering marriages that have been damaged. Additionally, he also specializes in behavioral addictions and helping others to work through trauma, grief, and deep personal loss, just to name a few things. He started at the university level at Old Dominion University and has years of experience running his agencies. With all of that acquired experience, wisdom, and knowledge, tonight he is here to discuss what it means to have a chosen marriage. And we're going to have to compete with the storm outside. We know that Lord sent the rain. But if you would please help me to joyfully welcome our speaker, my mentor and colleague, Dr. Chuck Carrington. Okay, we're going to hug.
She's too nice.
But before we begin,
nicer, you'd have wings.
It's okay. Before we begin, I would just like to take a moment to ask Dr. Chuck if he could share with us a little bit about the purpose behind this marriage enhancement seminar series that's actually kicking off tonight. My question for him is, what is the purpose behind the marriage enhancement seminar series? And why are you choosing to do so with this topic, the chosen marriage?
Okay, there's a test. So, I've been doing marriage counseling for a very long time. And the mic is really hot, Rich. Okay. I've been doing marriage counseling for a very long time. And over the decades of working with people in pain, I've developed a bunch of tools in my toolbox. And the thing about having tools is, when you deploy them, they work. And you see people getting better, they work. But you can only touch a few people at a time. So I might see 20, 30, 40 people in a week, but that's all I can see. And so, I've been doing a lot of praying. I'm getting older. If you haven't noticed, I'm not 19 anymore. I'm getting old. There's a lot of information that I've stored in my head that I just want to get out there. And so I've been praying about it, and I just believe the Lord's telling me, make this all available to people in a way that can continue and live beyond my years and touch many, many more people. And so I decided to put together what I'm calling my 7 greatest hits. These are not about me, by the way. These greatest hits are things that work. The 7 things that I use all the time that rescue marriages. And we're starting tonight with the chosen marriage, which is all about marriage culture. And the reason I'm starting with that is because Stephen Covey says, you begin with first things first, right? You start with the end in mind, but you start at the beginning. We're going to be starting with something that will help people who are maybe fiancés, or they're engaged. Maybe you're still in your first couple of years of your marriage. And the first couple of years is the time that you become married, that you learn about each other. Or you may be in the middle of a marriage. But regardless, choosing your culture is very important. And most people don't know that. So we're going to talk about that. So this is the first in a series of 7. And we're going to hit all the major topics that affect almost all marriages over the next 12 months. So I'm hoping you're going to enjoy it. So I don't know if that answers your question, Brenda, but I'm just excited about bringing these tools to people and making it available. And then you can share it with friends. And if you decide to download information and such, you could continue to populate the world with what I think are some pretty cool insights and tools. They're not all mine, by the way. I won't take credit for all of them, but I use them all the time. So we'll get started. Brenda, you were so kind. You kind of made me feel a little nervous. I'm wondering if the rain has something to do with, maybe God's trying to tell me, speak up. All right, so we're going to be talking about the chosen marriage. I decided to call it that for a reason. I originally had all kinds of other names. We're doing a series that is marriage by design. So the idea is marriages don't just happen. They can, but then you get something I would call a normal or typical marriage, and nobody really wants one of those. So to choose how to frame your marriage, to design your marriage, takes intentionality. And I want to talk to you about a process. A process is actually rather simple. Most people don't use it. It's a biblically based process. There's nothing I ever do in psychology or counseling that isn't based in biblical truth. Most people don't understand this, but psychology is not anti-Christian, anti-biblical. Good psychology always agrees with what the Bible has to say. Bad psychology we can throw away. It's useless. But good psychology always agrees with the Bible. And the Bible gives us a template of relationship, a template that when applied is going to bring you to success in your marriage. It's going to bring you to success in a lot of relationships, but we're specifically talking about the most important relationship you can have, other than the one with God, is the relationship you have with your spouse. Even if you're not a Christian, if you don't consider yourself a religious or spiritual person, you should know that that relationship is your primary one, because how that marriage goes, so goes your heart and so goes your future. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to decide what your marriage is going to look like, to choose your marriage, to create a culture. So all marriages have a culture. So let's define real quick what a culture is, because there's always a lot of different definitions that you can use for any one thing. Culture is where two or more people together decide on how to live their lives. So they're doing it in conjunction with each other. We have lots of different layers of culture. We have global culture, national culture, regional culture, state cultures. We have our Hampton Roads culture. You have a family culture. You might have an ethnic culture. You might have a language culture. You have a family culture. You have a marriage culture. You have a culture of one. We have lots of layers of culture. The most important one, obviously, is the one you build with your spouse. So what is a culture? Cultures are habits, rituals, traditions, things that you do together that you can predict. The outcomes are in motion because of your culture. If your culture is well defined, you can pretty much predict what your outcomes are going to be. The problem we have is most people don't define their culture, at least before they get married, and most people don't define their culture at all. And this is a phenomenon in our postmodern marriages that, again, most people don't know this stuff. But when I sit in a room with clients, I quickly can evaluate the health of their marriage and their marriage culture based on what they say or what they do. And that's how I frame or triage what I'm going to do. So, there it goes. We're going to look at what a normal marriage is in the 21st century, and then we're going to look at maybe what yours could become. So I'm going to explain normal, and then you can decide if you want normal. I put this up there because when I was in counseling school in my master's program, the popular saying, we didn't like labeling. This was back in the day when labeling was the hot button. There's a lot of new hot buttons now, but back then it was labeling. And we would say, normal is not for people. Normal is a setting on a dryer. Okay? So we weren't allowed to use the word normal. But normal means something. It's what normally happens. It's what we normally do. It's how we normally react. And in your family, in your marriage, you have a normal. And it covers most of what you do. So just so my professors don't come back from the grave and get me, we'll call it typical if you'd rather. Okay? Typical, normal, whatever. So what is a normal marriage, postmodern American marriage? Most marriages last about 8 years on average. In our culture right now, about 68% of the divorces that are filed by the wives, not the husbands. Husbands seldom file for divorce for a lot of reasons we don't have time to go into, but about 68% are filed by women. About 60% of the divorces happen between the ages of 25 and 30, with the mean being 30 years old. I can't even imagine going back to being 30, which was a very long time ago, and thinking that my life has just suddenly ended. I mean, I got married for the first time when I was 30. I was still young at 30. First marriages, somewhere around 50% end in divorce. Second marriages, anywhere from 60 to 70%. Third marriages, anywhere from 70 on up. end in divorce. Marriage fails. When I speak to men and women who are in a marriage who are not divorced but are trying to survive their marriage, typically what I hear, and I have to remember, just a little caveat here, I am a marriage counselor, which means I hear a lot of bad stuff. Not everybody's going to have the same report. But I see a cross-section of marriages which you would look at and think, these people are healthy. Some of your best friends, family members, church members, you don't know that they're struggling, but they are, because inside their marriage, it's not healthy. We don't know that about people unless we can get up close to them. So what I hear is the primary complaint is communication isn't happening. My husband and my wife, they don't communicate well. We're not communicating. We're fighting a lot. Okay. Conflict comes when communication breaks down. Communication breaking down creates distance between the two of you. Distance is frightening. And so we fight about it. We're actually trying to get the distance to close, but we do it wrong. So loneliness comes after the communication breakdown. Then we have fighting, which creates harm, sometimes toxicity. The loneliness then becomes saturated with pain, and the pain causes more distance, and then desperation comes in. We hear this all the time. This is what happens in marriages in our postmodern culture. Marriages are in pain. And I would say about 80% of them, if you were to pull them in at any random time, you would hear these same stories from just about anybody. Communication, conflict, loneliness. And then we make some sort of effort to fix those things by trying to do things that are mitigating those circumstances. So for instance, a lot of people will start doing social media to find connectivity there. A lot of men in our culture right now, they turn to pornography. It's a big chunk of what I do is pornography recovery. And then trying to help rescue the wives out of the betrayal trauma that they're suffering because of the pornography. They look at social media, pornography, gaming, individual or solo activities, workaholism, all kinds of ways to try to connect and feel because the marriage isn't giving them what they want. And instead of saying, well, how do I make my marriage better? They just look for ways to fill the gaps. So this is what we would say are typical marriages. The sad part is that your children watch your marriage and then they get programmed to decide what marriage is supposed to be like, or in some cases, what kind of marriage they're trying to run away from, and it affects their marriages. So we actually transmit down through the generations all of our pathology, all of our problems. So the contemporary postmodern marriage is fraught with pain. It is fraught with toxicity, with conflict, with cheating, infidelities, all kinds of things. Why is this important? Because you could just divorce, right? In this world of no-fault divorce, people just divorce. That's why marriages last 8 years. But when you got married, I want you to think about it. Did you look at your spouse-to-be and say, till death do us part or 8 years, whichever comes first? When I got married, I thought this was forever. And that was my goal. I didn't think until something better comes along. Something better comes along. It's kind of like your cell phone sitting on, I don't know if you've ever done this. Side note. You go out on a date night with your husband or your wife, and you set your phones on the table, and you're talking, and the phone goes bing, and you look at it. What does that say to your spouse? That says, I'm really interested in you, my dear beloved spouse, the most important person in my life, until something better comes along. That's what's going on in our marriages. We do what we have to do in our marriage until something better comes along. It's become ubiquitous in our culture. Now, I'm not trying to paint this depressing view of marriage. I just wanted to let you know what normal looks like. And these are statistics. I went through, I pulled all the statistics I could in preparation for this, and quite frankly, it took me days to sort through them. They're all bleak. I didn't find anything really exciting. The most exciting statistics I found, I started off by saying how many wedding or bridal magazines are in publication at this time. I couldn't find that number, but my computer started to smoke. I think there's a lot. The average wedding in America, average, some are a lot cheaper, some are a lot more, but the average wedding in America costs about $32,000. That's the venue, that's the band, the cake, the dress, all the stuff that goes in flowers. If it's a destination wedding, there might be more, the ring. $32,000 is the average. I bet you'd be shocked to find out two things. One, only 40% of the people that get married in this country do premarital counseling, even though premarital counseling is often free. I mean, any good pastor will be happy to sit down with you before you get married and talk to you about marriage. And they do it for free. If you hire someone to do marriage counseling, I get those calls all the time. Do you do premarital counseling? Sure, I do. And I tell them what my specific standards and my techniques and such are. They say, how much do you charge? Well, we usually meet 12 times, 12 weeks in a row, covering 12 topics, and I charge $100 an hour. $1,200 for premarital counseling, that's a lot of money. But they're going to put $32,000 into their marriage or into their wedding. Less than 1% is spent on premarital counseling on average compared to what people spend on weddings. So what does that tell us? That tells us that people are into the event of getting married, but they have no thought or foresight about the actual activity of being married, what that's going to be like, because premarital counseling sets standards to get you to a place where your marriage is going to be extraordinary. You look at grandma and grandpa who's been married 40 years, I want a marriage like that. Well, what did they do? They worked hard at it. They had a lot of meeting of the mind. They have cultural similarities. They had families that would pull together and help them, and they were raised from childhood to understand what being married is. We don't do that anymore in this culture. We have a nice wedding. 8 years later, we expect people to come bring us on the wedding gift and do it again. Okay? I mean, seriously, this is not healthy. But this is what we do. So we want to talk about how not to let that happen. So I would have you raise your hands, but I don't want anybody to get embarrassed. I don't want you men to get elbowed. But, if I asked you to raise your hands, how many of you would like to stay married? I would like to think that all of you that are married would like to stay married. Most people don't come to something like this with the intention of divorcing. Now, I do know that a lot of people show up that's in the back of their mind. But that's not your goal. Your goal is to stay married and have a good one. I would dare say that if I did ask for a show of hands, everybody would raise their hands if I said, how many of you would like to be happy in your marriage? Everybody would raise their hand. How many of you want to be miserable in your marriage and get a divorce or just live in pain for the rest of your life? Nobody's going to do that, right? So that's the reality. Why is this important? Well, because marriage, unfortunately, I have to look behind me to see what slide I'm on. Why is that not advancing? That's weird. Oh, there it goes. Marriage as a culture is very important to understand. I'm going to be using the word culture a lot. We all know what a good character looks like. You say, oh, that person's got a good moral character, or she's got an honest character, or they're great parents. We can see that, right? It's evidence. How do we know that they have good character? Because of what they do. Not because of what they say, but because of what they do. If you have children that are out there, causing mayhem, I used to raise foster kids, so I know what mayhem looks like. We used to joke that Johnny would stick a fork in the cat, and that would be a bad day. Kids can do some really strange things, and when people see those kids doing strange things, they quickly look at you and say, well, what's wrong with you, parent? We can judge the fruits of a marriage by what we see. Marriage, a culture is to marriage what character is to a person. So character, this is how I define it from a men's group. A lot of the women, I can't see y'all, but if there's women from the women's group in here, you probably never heard me say this. The men hear me say it all the time. Character is the expression, the outward expression of your inward process. Whatever's going on in your thoughts and your feelings and your choices and your habits, all those things that are happening in you are based on event management, feelings management, and it comes out in evidence from your actions and tells the world what's going on the inside. We can tell a lot about somebody by what they're doing. This is why we judge people based on what they do, not based on what they say they wanted to do. We judge ourselves, of course, based on what we intend because we know what we intend, but we judge people based on what they do. Fair or not fair, that's what we do. So character is the outward expression of an individual. Culture is the outward expression of your marriage. We can look at your marriage culture and we can say a lot about the process that's behind it. And that's what I'm doing. I'm pushing the wrong button. The new clicker. I know nobody uses clickers anymore, but I'm old school. All right. Your culture in your marriage is driven by your choices. And there are basically three cultural drivers. I'm going to tell you what the common ones are, and then I'm going to tell you what we're going to try to instill in you. The first cultural driver, the thing that makes your culture develop, is your feelings. We are in the golden age of feelings. In psychology, for about 30 years now, we have been talking feelings. If you go to a counselor, they're going to say, how does that make you feel? You never heard that. You haven't talked to me anyway. We say that. We practice that in counseling school. They make us sit there and say, how does that make you feel? Say more about that. Tell me more. We have these weird things we say. Tell me about your mother. I'm sure you've heard these joked about in TV a lot, but we use those on purpose. How does that make you feel is important, because when you have a feeling, it's a warning light, like on the dashboard of your car. It tells you something's good or bad. Something's going wrong if you feel bad. Something's going right if you feel good. So we use our feelings, and that's important. But we have become so tied to feelings now that all of our decisions are feelings-based. And feelings-based decisions usually go wrong because feelings change. Feelings are not reliable. Feelings are transient. They're temporary. They change if you get new information. They change if somebody's mood changes, especially if it's your mood. They change with the events, with the environments, with the time of day, with the day of the week. Our feelings change all the time. If we make our decisions in our marriage only based on feelings, we're in trouble. Now, there's a truth that I learned. My dad said a lot of weird things because he was an old misogynistic guy, but some of the stuff he said stuck with me because it's true. He was a child, was raised in the 50s, so he had a lot of different ideals. So one of them was, my dad grew up on Navy bases. He was never in the Navy, neither was his father, but his father was a civilian employee of the Navy, so they all lived in Navy housing on Navy bases from World War II on. So he would say all kinds of things, like, because he wanted to be Popeye or something, he would say, well, the husband is the captain of the ship, and the wife is the first mate. But when the emotional storms come by, the captain goes below decks and gives command over to the first mate. He's better at it. He would say things like, we're not the emotional captain. We're the logistical captain. Mom's the emotion. Mom will do emotions. So we give command over to the wives, specifically guys, because we don't do emotions well. We're terrible at it. We grow up fearing them. We're naturally biologically predisposed to avoid them because we go to fight or flight. We don't really want to bother with them because then we have to actually learn a new thing. We just don't like them. Men don't like emotions. We do fight or flight very well. We don't do emotions. Women, on the other hand, are masters at emotion. We know that. We value that. Women do create the emotional standards by which the family operates, which is a good thing because if you leave it up to men, they'd be out burning things and peeing on stuff or maybe even peeing on fire. That's always fun when you're a teenager. I always laughed when my kids say, we're going to put out the fire by peeing on it. Go for it. It's going to be hilarious. And they didn't like it after they died. For the guys who've done that, you know why you don't put out fire by peeing on it. Women probably don't have a clue, but men do things like that. We're not necessarily the best navigators of the world's problems. But feelings will lead you astray because you might be feeling really upset right now and you make a decision and you act on that decision and then you change your mind. But all the results of the actions that you took are still there. Actions are permanent. Feelings are transient. So that's the first one. That is the most common. I'd say 80% or more of marriages are driven by feelings. And who's in charge of the feelings? We give it to our wives. Did you know, at least in Christian counseling, which is the only kind of counseling I do, most of the wives come to me and say, I want my husband to lead the family the way it says in the Bible. I want a biblical husband who leads the family. And so if I go to the husband, I say, well, your wife wants you to lead. If he's honest with me, he'll say, but I don't know how. Because marriages are currently feelings-based. But that doesn't work. The second most common way to manage a marriage is through event-based management. An event happens, a crisis happens, and you respond to it. All right? Crises happen all the time. The problem with a crisis is it's not your normal status. It is an emergency or it is something unusual. So you're acting on the crisis and acting on the crisis and acting on the crisis, and your marriage has all these actions building up that give you a culture of crisis management. I think it was Stephen Covey talked about quadrant 2 thinking, where if you're doing what's urgent but not important all the time, you're putting out wildfires, then you will not be able to do what's important. You should do what's important, not what's urgent. But crisis management, event-based drivers in your marriage are all about crisis management. It's all about doing something. Now, men are good at that. How many women? Well, again, I'm trying to resist having you put your hands up because I know that gets people in trouble. But think about this, ladies. When you tell your husband something that went wrong or something that's going on with one of your girlfriends, or you're not quite sure what you want to do for dinner, or the kids are having this problem, what does the guy say? Well, this is what you need to do to fix it. Just do this. My favorite one is don't think about it. Just don't think about it works for men. but they want to tell you what to do to fix it because they're events-based. So if men are running a marriage, they tend to go from event to event to event. When women run a marriage, they tend to, not everybody's the same, but they tend to go from feeling to feeling to feeling, both of which get you in trouble because situations change. Feelings and events are both transient. Some people do a hybrid of both. So there's really only one, it's the third option, the only one that really works, and that's having a deliberative choice before you need to make it in your marriage culture. You sit down and you define what the goals are, what you want to do, how you want to react, how you want to respond, where you want to go in life. You figure that out first, and then when the problem comes, you solve it. My wife asked me once, she said, how is it you can make such a fast decision about things? I said, well, it's easy. I'm a guy. No, I didn't say that. I wanted to say that. I made those decisions because having gone to business school, you learn to think about goals and outcomes. And so I had like this, I like to call it a thought bubble. I had this thought bubble over my head. And everything that I wanted to accomplish, everything that I thought was right, everything that I thought was moral, basically all the stuff about me that's, because I'm a guy, so I'm perfect. Everything that I thought should happen was in this thought bubble. And when something would come along and say, I want to get in your thought bubble, going to buy a new car, going to change jobs, my mother-in-law wants to move in, things like that are coming, you're trying to get in my thought bubble. If it fit, yes, do it. If it didn't fit, no, don't do it. That's how men tend to think. If the event fits, do it. If the event doesn't fit, don't do it. It's really simple, right? But now you've got a spouse. And you want that spouse to be happy. So you look at her thought bubble and you look at your thought bubble. You think, I'll just do what she wants. That doesn't work for very long because you're going to want to do what you want too, and they're going to clash. What you have to do is you have to overlap those two thought bubbles. And all of you know what a Venn diagram is. You have the two circles overlap, and the part that's overlapping is what you have in common. You want to get that overlap to increase. It needs to be pretty substantial to begin with, but you want to increase it over time. This is a chosen marriage. This is a purposeful marriage. This is creating a culture that works for the two of you. So, okay, there should be an orange tree. Okay, good. I don't know what Joel is because I can't see. I really think you should need a monitor up there, Joel. He said, did he say no? Well, you got a clock. I know clocks don't mean anything to most of us that get up on and preach, but you got a clock, which is cool. Can't have a monitor. Are you here, Joel? You're here. No monitor. Okay. You must be even a lot better than I am at this. I never look over my shoulder. It's like, okay. So if you were walking down the street and you saw an orange or even an orange leaf, if you know anything about orange trees, I'm not a botanist. I think that's what they call them. But if I saw an orange, I would know something. That came off an orange tree. And if it's a healthy looking orange, I could say, oh, well, it's an orange. It came off an orange tree. It's healthy. Therefore, I can conclude some things. Orange trees exist. There's one somewhere near here, and it's healthy because it produced a healthy orange. If I look at the leaves of the plants, I can also say, okay, well, that's an orange leaf, and it's healthy. Okay. I know the orange tree exists. I don't have to look any further. When someone walks in my office, there's a lot of tricks. If you've never had a marriage counselor and you want to go get one, there's some things I could tell you. Like, for instance, be careful where you sit. Marriage counselors were very aware of where you sit. I was taught to have two side chairs and a couch. And make sure the side chairs are far apart and the couch is centrally located. And then watch where the couple sits when they're coming in for their first visit. They sit down, like some of you folks over here, you're real close, you got your arms around each other. That means you're close. A lot of you are sitting close together. Most of you are sitting close together. So I'm talking to the wrong audience. You guys are all fine. You should just go home. Okay, but if they sit on opposite ends of the couch, that means they're still together, but they're distancing. If they sit in the armchairs as far away from each other as they can get, there's a problem. There's distance and communication issues in that marriage. We can tell the fruits of a marriage. We can tell the health of a marriage by the fruits that we see, by the leaves that we see. A fruit would be the outcomes of your marriage, the things that happen in the end where you're producing something. The leaves are more like the decisions and the actions that you make. So if you have a leaf that's brown and it's got holes in it from bugs and it's dry and brittle, okay, that means a lot of your decisions are probably not being made well. If the fruit is rotten or dwarfed or never ripens at all, then you're not getting the outcomes you want. We can look at your marriage and we can tell if it's healthy. Well, you can do the same. And I'm going to give you some ways to do that. By the way, I'm pushing through a lot of material, and I'm hoping that you're not feeling like I'm just feeding you with a fire hose. I'm trying to be as subtle as I can, but pushing through material because I want to offer you something at the end that's going to give you a lot of deep insight if you want it. And I want to kind of pour into you about 10 to 12 hours of counseling, and I want to do it in a way that you can actually receive it. So I'm not giving you a lot of depth. We will do the Q&A. But if your marriage is healthy, it's going to produce healthy leaves, healthy fruit. And people can look at it, and you can look at it. The most important thing is, guess who looks at your marriage health more than you do, other than the marriage counselor? Who's going to look at your marriage health the most? Kids. Yes, who said that? You get a free session, whoever you were. I can't see you, so I don't have to. Oh, it was you, Kathy? Well, no. Friends and family discount doesn't apply. Got to get some new blood. Okay. That's okay, Kathy. I still love you. What'd you do with Jim? That's called distancing. Why are you getting farther away from me? Jim? I thought we were friends. Anyway, just looking for a different chair to sit in, so I'm going to get away from this guy. All right, so looking at the fruit, looking at the leaves of your marriage, what do you see about the status of your marriage? Are you fighting a lot? Is there a lot of conflict? I don't mean an occasional conflict. There'll always be occasional conflict. If you have kids, there'll be a lot of occasional conflict. There's going to be conflict. Marriages are fine with conflict. It's not the conflict that's the problem. Actually, conflict in a marriage is a healthy thing. I don't know if you ever heard that before. A marriage without conflict is not a healthy marriage. It's an avoidant marriage, one where you're not becoming more intimate. Conflict in a marriage is very healthy, but what makes it unhealthy is when you don't resolve the conflict and bring it to a conclusion. Okay, so do you have a lot of conflict that leads to fights that doesn't get resolved? Do you have a lot of fights? I think it's Jordan Peterson says that you should have like a handful of fights in the 40 or 50 years you're married, and that should be about it. A fight would be a major knockdown, drag out, not necessarily physical, but a big fight. They should be so rare that you can count them on one hand over the course of a couple decades. But conflicts happen all the time. We resolve the conflict, we learn more about each other, we grow together, it strengthens us, and we have now something good to put into our win pile. When you resolve a conflict, it's a win. If it's a win-win, it's a win. If you win and your spouse loses, then it's a fight. I define fights, by the way, not as whether or not you're throwing things or something of that nature, which does happen, but that's rare. I define a fight as when you have decided to dig in and win at the expense of your spouse. Because if you're going to win, you're going to make your spouse the loser. And two things are wrong with that. One, you should never make your spouse a loser. Our job is to build up our spouses, to raise them up, to nurture them, to help them, to honor them. Doesn't matter if you're a man or woman, it's still your job. If you make them lose, you diminish them, you destroy them, you tear them down. We build up, we don't tear down. Second thing is, especially if you guys hear this, if you win, you're going to pay a big price for that win. There's no such thing as winning if you're a guy. Don't do it. Okay, your job is to lay your life down for your wife, not to win something over on her, because you're going to hurt her. And remember, feelings are the drivers for most women. Your actions are your events. They're going to hurt her. So when you try to win, you're going to cause victimization. It's just going to happen. So we don't do that. So there's a process that I would like you all to look at, and we're going to talk about the basics of the process. The process has 8 steps. So if you look at the Bible, we learn about the beginning from the end and the end from the beginning. Genesis and Revelation, it becomes a circle. God declared the end from the beginning, and in the end, he comes back and he repeats the beginning. He takes us back. It's the same thing with our relationships. If you want to have great outcomes in your marriage, you need to start with the outcomes in mind. Where are you going to be at the end of your marriage? Where are you going to be in 10 years? Where are you going to be in 5 years? Where are you going to be in 3 years? Where are you going to be tomorrow? You need to look forward and say, where do I want to land? So, if my wife and I decided we want to go on a vacation, and we know that we want to get on 264 and we're going to go east, but that's all we know, and so we jump in the car one day after work without having spending any time planning out our outcome, and we start driving east. For those of you living here in Hampton Roads, you get on 264 and drive east. What happens eventually? You're at the beach, and then what? You keep going, what'll happen? You're going to get wet because 264 ends. I never lived in a state before where freeways actually end. They usually just kept going in, but 264 ends. So when we get there, we have to make a decision. Do we drive north? Do we drive south? Or do we stay in one of the high-priced hotels there on the beach for some reason? We have to decide then. That's events-based. We don't know what we're doing. And so we get there, and we're at the end. What is that, Pacific Avenue or Atlantic Avenue, wherever it ends. You're stuck there at the end, and then you're going to decide, well, maybe she wants to go north. Maybe she wants to go to New York City, God forbid. And I want to go south and go to Orlando and spend a lot of money on Disney World, which is almost as bad as New York. So we have differences of opinion. Now we have a conflict. Or she wants to go north and visit her mom, and I want to go south and be far away from her mom. We have a conflict, okay? I loved my mother-in-law. When my mother-in-law passed last year, it was very sad. She was wonderful. Most of you have good mother-in-laws, you just don't know it. You have to have an outcome in mind before you can go into action, or you're going to have conflict. If not conflict, you're going to drive off the end of the, into the earth, into the ocean. Things are going to go bad. You have to have an outcome. So we start with that. What is your desired outcome? So once you figure that out, we want to be parents. How many kids do you want? Well, we'll figure it out when we get there. No, you should figure that out before you get married. Do we want to have kids at all? Yes. How many kids? 2, 4, 6. My dad said 2. My mom said 4. They had 3. They should have stopped at me. I was the perfect one, but they went on to get my brother. She did say that he was a good baby, but she went too far. When you have a perfect child, you should stop, just saying. My mom lives with me now. She's 84 years old. I say things like that, and I can move quickly enough she can't hit me anymore, which is a lot of fun. I get to tease her. I tease my kids. I have 2 biological sons. I have 5 sons, but I have 2 biological sons. And I always told them, because they're 3 years apart, and the youngest, of course, is always competing with the oldest. He always wants to catch up, which he never will. I always tell people, I have 2 wonderful sons. One of them I just love to death. He's so awesome, and the other one's pretty cool too. But I never name which is which. And then I sit back and watch. It's so much fun. Bad man. The second thing we look at is exposures. Exposures are the things that you get active in, that you touch, that you spend time in. So church is an exposure. You come to church, you get exposed to hopefully some good teaching, some good people, some fellowship, some worship, and it grows you. There are other exposures that aren't so great. And a lot of people know about social media, pornography, and all those. Those are bad exposures. Great outcomes tell you where you want to go, but then it starts to narrow the type of exposures that are acceptable to you. If you want to be a monogamous husband or wife, and you want to have a strong family, and you want to have good kids, and you want to have a lasting marriage, then the last thing you would do is look at pornography, right? Because that's the antithesis of all that. So exposures are important. Then we look at beliefs. What are your beliefs? Exposures, unfortunately, alter our beliefs. What you expose yourself to will change your thinking. It changes what we call metacognitions. You're thinking about thinking, your overarching thoughts. Exposures will change that. If you watch enough junk on TV or you do enough activities that are negative, it will change the way you see the world, the way you think. Your autopilot gets readjusted. So beliefs are very important. You want to stay true to your beliefs. And then once you have those beliefs, you set your life goals. And those goals then create standards, and those standards lead to choices, and choices lead to actions, and it's the accumulation of actions that leads to the outcomes. That's how we are supposed to live our lives. Now you are taking 2 lives and putting them together. Gary Smalley talks about marriage being a journey of 3 journeys: your journey, your spouse's journey, and your marriage journey. I like to say the marriage journey is when you bring Jesus into the center, because that holds you together, and you're all 3 on the same journey. But for those who aren't Christians, who don't have that level of insight, you can say, well, the marriage is the gravity that holds the 2 of you together so you can continue in one direction. But think about this. How many of you sat down with your spouse before you got married and talked about all the outcomes you hope to have, other than the $32,000 wedding and the destination? How many of you really talked about all that? Some of you will have. The vast majority of you never did. You didn't have that conversation. So maybe you think your journey is going to the same place because there's a strong physical attraction. Or perhaps you are thinking you're on the same journey because you both have a lot of fun together, or you both have the same friend group. You have something that you think is holding you together. He was there when I was hurting after my divorce. She was there when I was hurting after my wife died. Those are reasons why people get together too. And they sound like they're okay, but that's not enough to make a marriage. Because there's a lot of outcomes that are going to happen in your marriage over time. So you have to think about that in advance. If you've never done that, it's not too late. The process is you figure out what you're looking for, she figures out what she's looking for, you become really good friends, and you realize you're both heading in the same direction. You're both going to Orlando, away from the mother-in-law. If you're both going in the same direction, what are you smiling at down there? I see you, Beth. The lights are bright, but I can see you because your teeth, you're smiling so big, I can see your teeth. Some people are fun to tease. She's doing this. Sorry, Beth, I'm sorry. You still love me? Oh, good, because it's important that everybody loves me. There's a whole other topic there. We all want to be loved. Where was I? So if your journeys are heading in the same direction before you get married, it's easier to have a marriage because you're going to be going in the same direction. But what normally happens is you have a few things holding you together, but a lot of goals that aren't compatible. And so after you go along for a while, you start to deviate from each other. The marriage isn't strong enough to hold you together because your outcome goals are different. And that's when people sit down in the office and they say, "Doctor, tell me what to do. My husband and I have drifted apart," or "we have grown apart," or "we've lost that love and feeling," and they sing the song. It's not that you've grown apart, it's that you weren't originally together where it counts. But don't fret, because if you didn't have that conversation, if you weren't together where it counts, you can still fix it. Doesn't matter if you've been married 1 year or 20 years. You can make life-changing decisions to bring you back together. It's going to be a little tricky, but it's not impossible. And if you do it right, it's going to be fantastically fun for you. So we go back to thinking about, the outcomes that we want. Okay. I really envy Joel. He must be more limber than me. Okay. We have to define our outcomes. We want great outcomes. We don't want that typical outcome. Remember we said we don't want normal? We're not dryers. We don't do normal. We don't do high conflict and infidelities and pornography and toxicity. We don't want that. We want great outcomes. So you ask yourself 3 questions to define your outcomes. And these 3 questions are actually very simple. What do I want, or what do I and my spouse truly want in our marriage? It's what you both want, okay? Are we seeing those outcomes in our marriage today? That's the fruit and the leaves, right? Or are we lacking something? So you have to make a fearful assessment. And then the third one's the hard one. Am I, personally, truly making my best effort in this marriage? That's the part very few people ever come to me and say, "What am I doing wrong?" They always say, "Fix my spouse." There's a lot of this going on whenever someone's in marriage counseling. Well, he did this, well, she did this. Well, that's not fair because he did this, and I only did this because he did that. And I hear, when I was studying counseling, I said, I'm never going to be a marriage counselor. Because when I was doing my practicum, it's all I did. Okay, they asked me in the beginning, what are you not going to do when you become a counselor? Because I went to Regents, it's a Christian university, so I learned a lesson. Never tell God what you're not going to do. He's smart. I said, I don't ever want to do marriage counseling because I don't like conflict, and I never want to do any type of addiction work. Guess what I do? So like 80% of my counseling ministry is marriage counseling and addiction, and they kind of go together. It's like, and I do a few other things that are a lot more fun, like loss and grief and trauma, which is not fun, but I enjoy it. That sounds wrong. It's not fun, but it makes me feel like I'm doing something right. How's that? I just love it when people suffer. Something's wrong with me. I don't know. Where was I? I'm off my notes so far. I don't know who I am anymore. Okay, so postmodern marriages are a cultural failure. If you don't want a cultural failure, you have to get as far away from the postmodern marriage as you can. The only way you're going to do that is to figure out what is a postmodern marriage asking of you, and what do you want that's different, and then flee. Okay, you need to flee the sin. I have a riddle. Now, I know there's at least 5 guys from my men's group in here, and probably at least that many couples that I've ask this riddle of in here. If you think you know the answer, don't blurt it out. Just look like, you're really cool. I won't name any names. He looks behind. Okay, so the riddle is, you've probably heard it before. There's 6 seagulls sitting on a rock. One of the seagulls decides he's going to fly away. How many seagulls are left on that rock? Anybody have a guess? Anybody who doesn't know, have a guess? You cannot answer that, David. How many of you say, well, if one seagull decided to fly away, there's 5 seagulls left? 5 seagulls. You're so brave. Nobody raised their hand. How many of you say there are no seagulls left? Okay. How many of you say there are 6 seagulls? Okay. There are 6 seagulls. Because the one seagull that decided to fly away didn't actually take flight. He didn't actually take his choice and turn it to action. Choices, which are necessary, and good choices create good decisions, but good choices are necessary. But if you don't put your choice into action, it's worthless. It's like faith without works is dead. It doesn't help to make a decision. It only helps to make a decision and then act on it. So a lot of my clients will make decisions, but they'll never act on it. And I'll send them home with some homework, or go tell your wife this, or go tell your husband this, see how it works. They come back in a week or two. So how did your assignment go? Oh, I forgot. But you said you were going to do it. I know, I wanted to do it, but I didn't. Well, if you didn't do it, you didn't want it. Right? So in order to have true change, real change take hold of your life, you have to make decisions, and then you have to act on them. So there's a couple of reasons why we don't act. So true change requires that you do something radically different if you want to have a radically different outcome. So I put up there, I put the Constitution up there, I put the cross up there, and I put Sharpies. These all have something in common. Constitution, the colonists wanted a radical change in government, and they figured it out. They created their outcomes. They wrote it down, and they put it into action. They actually had to fight a war. God wanted us to be back in relationship with him. He wanted to bring salvation. He wanted to reconnect creation to him the way it was originally planned. He had an outcome in mind the whole time. A lot of actions, if you look at the Bible, there are a lot of actions leading up to that moment. You didn't necessarily see those actions in the moment as landing at the cross, but in retrospect, we can see it. But that changed everything. Everything about humanity, everything about creation, tipped the day of that crucifixion. Permanency. Change that lasts. If it's not permanent, it's not true change. It's temporary change. Your husband, not to pick on the guys, I'm a guy, so I can do it. We will make all kinds of agreements because of the emotionality of a conflict, and we might even be good at making the change for a week or two, maybe a day or two, some of us. Like, yes, honey, I will make sure that my underwear lands in the hamper instead of 3 feet away from it. I promise. And you'll do that for 3 or 4 days, but eventually you go back to throwing it on the floor. Why do we do that? Because we really didn't change. We really didn't agree to it. There were 5 boys plus my wife in our house when the kids were growing up. And we had 3 bathrooms. There was her bathroom. Actually, it was our bathroom, but it was her bathroom. Then we had the powder room, which was my bathroom because it had no storage. And then there was the downstairs bathroom, which belonged to the grubby 5 boys that I would go down there once a month and tell them there's moss growing on that toilet, clean it. If you've ever had a bunch of teenage boys, they don't seem to know what clean is. Okay, but I didn't care because I never went down there. But every once in a while, I have to go down there. Oh, how do you guys even go in there? But my wife would say, "You boys don't ever put the toilet seat down." And the boys would say, "Well, there's 5 of us, 6 of us, count me. I always put the toilet seat down because I wanted happiness. So why do we have to put the toilet seat down?" So I joked, my wife. We're not married anymore for a reason, and it's not all her. I got to tell you, I was kind of a snotty person, but I said, well, look, I'll compromise. We'll put it up, you put it down. 50-50. The guys are going, yeah. No, I have my own bathroom. Never. Change that lasts means you have to actually want the change. You have to implement the change. You have to be willing to make the change, and then you have to stick with it. The weird thing about change is change happens in a heartbeat. It's almost instantaneous. For those of you who are Christians, most of us can remember. In fact, Joel asked me this the other day. He asked me, what was my salvation story? And I knew exactly when, I knew exactly where. I remember it, and that was when I was 13 years old. I made the decision in a heartbeat. But coming up to it, I had to contemplate some things. I had to think about some things. Once I was convinced in my head, this is what I needed, this is what I wanted, this was the right thing, the change happened instantaneously. That doesn't mean everybody around me saw the change instantaneously. It did affect me immediately. One of the funniest things I did, all my friends did this, is we got all of our albums and we threw them away. Because we had things that were sinful, like the Beach Boys. Those real sinful guys. Those of you who are old like me would know who the Beach Boys are. Okay. The change was instantaneous. I started acting out, but nobody really knew it. So change is instantaneous. It can take a long time to lead up to it. Guys, a lot of you are talking about change, taking a long time to get there, but once you make the change, it's instantaneous for you. But then you have to start practicing it so that it will stick. If it doesn't stick, it's not lasting change. But there's another element. The people around you are not going to believe in your change until it's lasted long enough that you've accumulated enough proof. So the outcome of your change takes action over time. Okay? True change that lasts requires action, consistent action that lasts. And there are two prerequisites to true change. They're very simple. Two prerequisites. For those of you who have ever gone to business school or have done any marketing, you've heard of a WIFM. A WIFM is an acronym. It goes back to the 80s, if I remember correctly. It stands for What's in it for me? There has to be something in it for you or you won't change. We call that the WIFM. And the second thing is you need proof beyond a logical, reasonable doubt that if you follow through with your change and you do what's required of you, that WIFM is going to appear. I was talking to somebody earlier. I won't use his example. I said I would, but I won't. But think about this. Following a process that isn't going to lead to your WIFM is something you're probably not going to do. So how many of you would love to win Powerball? Just one person wants to win the Powerball? Two? That's it. I must be a sinner. I've sat around thinking about what I could do with $300 million. And then I realized it's not enough. I need $400 million because $300 million won't do what I want. So, isn't that weird? Have you ever done that? If I had $100,000, I'd want two. That's human nature. To win the Powerball or win any lottery, the process is simple. You buy a ticket, you wait, you win. That's the process. What's the likelihood of that happening? It's not going to happen. What you're really going to do is you're going to buy a lottery ticket, you're going to lose $1, and you're going to make some trash. That's what's really going to happen. That's the outcome you can predict. What's in it for me to buy a lottery ticket? Nothing. I've never bought one in my life for two reasons. One is I've always been poor, $1's a lot. No, the reason I don't buy it is because I know in my heart that God would never have me win the lottery because that would distract me from what he wants for me, which is faith in him, not faith in the lottery. He knows that I have this tendency to latch on to pipe dreams, so he doesn't want me. I don't believe he would want me to play the lottery. So because of the outcome, I won't play it. I know what the outcome is for me. So I won't play it. Now, a lot of people play it. If you play it for fun, that's fine. If you play it as an investment strategy, there's something wrong, okay? Because it's a bad one. You could put $2 bills together and stick them under your mattress and hope they breed, and you'll have a more likely chance of making $3 than you will playing the lottery, okay? So we have to know the outcome is likely to produce the WIFM if we're going to make a lasting change, right? So that's important. Those are the prerequisites. Now, what comes next? Good thinking. I promise we're almost done. Good thinking. If you never looked at systems thinking, we don't have time to go into it. Systems thinking says all relationships, all operations, all things are pretty much an organism that's in motion. So if you're in a marriage, your marriage has momentum. It's moving, it's growing, but everything tends to wind down. The law of entropy, things wind down over time. So what do? We have to keep kicking some more energy into the marriage to keep it moving. That's when you have date night and you want to be romantic and you definitely don't want to be mean to your mother-in-law because that'll slow your marriage down. You want to make sure you're doing the right things. So there's things that are positive that reinforce your marriage, and there's things that are negative that slow it down. There's things internal and things that are external. That's basically what systems thinking would tell us. So good thinking recognizes that there are a lot of variables. So what do? we figure from good thinking, we have to figure out what we're supposed to be deciding. And we do that by asking some questions. So, what do I want for me? I have a whole group that we're going to be doing just on that. What do I want? Not just me, but you guys too. Yes, I know it's about me, but it's you guys too. What do I want from me in my life? I have to decide that before I can get into deciding what I want for my marriage. Then, what do I want for my spouse? Well, if you don't know what she wants, then how do you know what you want to give her? Because if you want to give her the things she doesn't want, it's not going to work. Okay? And then finally, what actions can we pursue that are likely to produce those outcomes? We don't play the lottery, we save our money, right? If you want to have a financial outcome, you pay off your bills, you get rid of the credit cards, you save some money, you do the whole Dave Ramsey thing. I saw on Babylon Bee the other day, they said that Dave Ramsey's now going to be at the gate with St. Peter checking to see how well you were compliant with your finances before you get into heaven. That terrified me. I want to go to heaven. And if Dave Ramsey is going to take Peter's place, I'm in trouble. I've been in ministry so long, I don't know what a paycheck is. Right? Those of you who are pastors, you understand there are lean times. Okay, so you need to figure out, what do you want? That's your circle on the Venn diagram. What does she want? That's her circle on the Venn diagram. How do they overlap, and how are we going to make these common wants work? And there's a process. There's going to be things that don't fit in the Venn diagram, things that are important to you, important to your spouse, that don't fit in the middle. That's okay. That's normal. But you still have to negotiate those things. Sometimes we do things solo. That's okay if you've negotiated them, right? So to choose your culture, you must have first correct thinking, because correct thinking will tell you what kind of questions you need to ask. Come on, there you go. Asking the right question will yield the right answer most of the time. And that right answer will solve the problem. The problem is if we ask the wrong question, we will get, even if we get the right answer to the wrong question, we still have the wrong answer. And so that solution will be wrong. A lot of us say, well, what do I need to do to make myself happy in this marriage? That's the wrong question. What do I need to do in conjunction with my spouse so that we have the right outcome in our marriage? That's the right question. What's missing? That's another right question. There are a lot of questions you need to ask. I've written them out in the worksheets that we have so that you can start asking these questions. Once you ask that question, the right one, and you get a correct answer, it's the solution, even if you don't like it. Okay. My solution financially is I can't spend everything I make. If I want to have a retirement, which is coming up really soon, and I have saved nothing because I put it all into the ministry, thinking the ministry will always take care of me, and then I got sick and the ministry it collapsed, the key man effect. And so now I'm working really hard and I'm saving every penny I can. That's an outcome of choice. It was a bad choice. It was ignorance on my part. All right. Small decisions lead to great outcomes, good or bad. If you make a lot of little bad decisions, you'll end up with a bad outcome. If every time you and your spouse get into a conflict and you say something contemptuous or critical or biting, over time, they're going to feel contempt back at you, and contempt kills love. Contempt is the polar opposite of love. Love looks for the good. Love looks for the attributes of value in somebody. Love looks at a person the way God would look at a person. Contempt looks at the bad and discards all the good. So many people when they're fighting will say I said this to the women's group, and I thought they were going to crucify me because they misunderstood what I was trying to say. But if you challenge your husband in certain ways, he's going to lie to you. Why? Because he's terrified of telling you the truth, because he knows what'll happen. It'll hurt you, hurt him, and cause a conflict. And so, like most brave warrior men, we run and hide. We don't want to admit that, hey, I think this is unfair. We won't say that, not to our wives, not unless we're really mad. And then we go to town and we really mess them up. We say terrible, contemptuous things because we're trying to win. You see, little decisions, little actions build up. And if you've been hurt in your marriage, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, if you've been hurt in your marriage, think about what's hurting you. It's probably all those little things, those little contemptuous remarks that we make when we fight. I mean, how often do you look in your spouse's eyes and you're adoring them, you're feeling great about them, and say, you know, I really hate you. We don't do that. But when somebody went out and spent $1,000 that you were planning on using for something else and they didn't tell you, and now you aren't able to pay your bills and the mortgage is in jeopardy and the kids need clothes and all this, you say, sometimes I just really hate you. Right? You don't mean it any more then than if you were looking at them adoringly, but you'll say it then. Okay? These little seeds take root. So you want to ask yourself, what do I want? What do I want for my spouse? And what are we doing right or wrong to get there? All right. So I saw this on the internet. I was looking for some graphics for the book that we're working on. And I saw this, and my first reaction is, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. One of the reasons is because there's the word victim there. And as a counselor, I don't like that word. But I started thinking about it. And I started pondering, what does this really mean? Well, in counseling, we know everything happens for a reason. The axiom I used, which I used to teach at the university, was all behavior has a purpose. If somebody does something, there's a reason for it. There's always a reason behind every behavior. Even if it's a small behavior, there's a small reason. There's always a reason. Everything happens for a reason. So the statement says, you are a victim of the rules and beliefs that you live by. I thought, victim, I don't like that. But then I started thinking about it. Well, if you believe that the problems in your marriage are the fault of your spouse, if you believe the problems in your marriage are the fault of circumstances, if you believe the problems in your marriage are the fault of events outside your control, outside your life, it's because you have the wrong car or the wrong house or the wrong job or the wrong spouse. If you believe that the problems in the marriage are outside of you, then you are a victim because you've given up all your power. You've now defined your marriage by things you have no control over. And what is a victim? A victim is someone who's had their power taken away and are being controlled by somebody else. So if you believe that others outside of you control your marriage outcome, there's little hope that you can make the marriage work. But if you can place responsibility where it's due, not all responsible, but the ones where it's due, on yourself or on your marriage process or on the culture you've built for your marriage, if you can place responsibility inside the marriage and take responsibility for your part, now you have hope, right? Because you're no longer a victim. Now you're an active player in the outcomes. Responsibility is about taking control of the problems that belong to you. And in a marriage, even if it's her fault or his fault, it still belongs to you because you share the problem. The outcomes belong to both of you. Okay, so you need to ask yourself some questions. I jotted a few down, they're not up there. How do you think and what do you think and what questions do you ask? How do you think? Am I a victim or am I looking for a collaborative outcome that's positive? What do I think about marriage? Do I think marriage is supposed to be my way or the highway? If you were my dad, you'd say, yeah. And then he met my mom and found out how wrong he was. And she was really good at making sure he knew that. They were married until my dad passed away. And my mother, she says, I didn't realize when I married your dad that I was going to be raising him too. But she had to because his parents were so awful. Don't read too much importance into the trivial things of life. I asked you to bring me a cheeseburger. You brought me a hamburger. You don't love me. Believe it or not, I had one couple when I was a church counselor, one of my first couples, I almost quit after this. They broke up over toothpaste and toilet paper. I'm not joking. We had so many conflict resolution sessions where she was a dental hygienist. She believed that if you left your toothbrush out and you flushed the toilet, it would atomize the water and put bacteria onto the toothbrush. So the toothbrush had to go in a cup in the medicine cabinet and be closed. Okay, fine, that's her standard. But he didn't believe that, so he didn't want to do that. So you would think, well, naturally, she could put her toothbrush away in the cabinet, but he can have his in a cup on the sink. What difference does it make? And she says, but we only have one toothbrush. I said, okay, but you have children too. She says, yeah, but we all use the same toothbrush. Like, ooh. Is that you, Genevieve? She said, ooh. It's so funny. They only have one toothbrush, and she's worried about germs from the toilet. Okay? And she didn't want him to use his brand of toothpaste, that he'd been using all his life. He had to use her toothpaste, not because it was better, but she doesn't want the flavor of his toothpaste on the toothbrush. Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, this couple's probably not going to make it, but I didn't say that out loud. And then they came to me for the last straw. He puts the toilet paper on the roll the wrong way. David's like, do you put it on the roll at all? I can't remember who was talking about it recently. I saw somebody talking that the laziest thing in the world is we're sitting there on the toilet. You got toilet paper, you got the roll. You could put it on there in half a second. It's right there. But how many of us guys, not me, but other less perfect guys, just take the roll and put it on top of the toilet paper holder and walk away? So there are 3 ways to put toilet paper on a roll. Most of us only talk about 2. Flap on the back, flap on the front. They argued about it. They broke up because he could not agree with her. Couldn't agree on the toothpaste, couldn't agree on where the toothbrush lived, and couldn't agree on the toilet paper, and they broke up over this. Trivial things that broke up the marriage. Now, that sounds silly, and it is probably the silliest reason I've heard of someone breaking up. But I promise you that every couple that I talk to has a silly reason why they're fighting sometimes. And you know that too. There have been times that you fought over things that later on you're going, I feel like an idiot. I can't believe I fought over that. All right. So everything happens for a reason. We need to assign responsibility where it needs to go. Brenda, I know we're over time. I know you're probably pointing at your watch, but I don't even know where you are. Can I keep going? Is that okay? Just for a few minutes. We're almost done. The next step is setting standards. Standards are the rules of the game. Standards join your beliefs, your choices, your actions, and your habits into predictable and reliable processes that produce the intended outcome. 10 Commandments, right? Most of us agree it's actually not thou shalt not kill, it's thou shalt not murder, but we won't get into that right now, especially because I don't know if Joel would agree with me, so I don't want to poke the bear, because he's the pastor, I'm not. But if you believe that thou shalt not kill is a standard, you don't go killing. What if you don't agree with that? There are a lot of cultures that do not have any compulsion against killing. Your standard tells you what you can and can't do. Right? You have to establish standards for your marriage that get you to the outcomes, and they need to be rock solid like the commandments. There are certain things you don't do. You don't beat your children, right? I hope, please. I know crate training is illegal now too, which is not fun. Anybody ever crate train your child like you do your dog? Don't say yes. There's probably social workers here. But I used to joke about that when I was a social worker and I was doing foster care. I used to say, well, I find crate training works really well on these children. And the other social workers, don't say that out loud. They'll come after you. Social workers don't have a sense of humor. You have to agree. Do we want kids, and how will we raise them? Are we believers or are we not? Do we want to be financially independent at a certain age, or do we want to have all the toys we can get? Okay. Standards set the rules. And those standards allow you to make good choices. Those good choices, everything in your life is a reflection of the choices that you make or have made, and they accumulate to an outcome or a series of outcomes. And if your outcomes aren't what you want, you've got to change the choices. The biggest detriment, I think, in life is to make small, seemingly inconsequential choices that are poorly conceived, that are by the seat of the pants, that over time embitter your spouse or your children. I see this all day long. Okay. Remember, feelings are fleeting, and events change. So if you make your actions based on the choice of the moment, it's not going to work. So could be the Mona Lisa up there. Small brush strokes make great masterpieces. Have you ever looked closely at a masterpiece painting? When I was a freshman in college a long time ago, when I was 19, 18, I took art history. That was back in the days when they put up a slide. You know, we didn't have computers. They put up a slide. We had to tell them what the picture was. They would show us these close-ups of the masterpiece, little tiny brush strokes, maybe an eighth or, even smaller of an inch long. And when you look at it closely, it's just a little bit of color. It doesn't mean anything. But it was intentional. The master puts these little brush strokes in because he has in his mind an outcome. Now, if I was to paint the Mona Lisa, I would use my favorite tool, the 3-inch trim brush that I use for painting my house. And it wouldn't come out anything like that. Because I would not be using small strokes. Because I don't have the patience to do that. But in my relationships, I want to lay down very small strokes. I raised a lot of kids. Between my 5 kids and then over 100 foster kids, I spent a lot of time with kids. It's the little tiny seeds you plant, the little thumbprints you put on the heart that turn them into adults. A lot of us don't do that. It's important to understand the littlest brush strokes make the great masterpiece. There was a slide I was expecting there that I think I took out. Yep, okay. Andy Andrews wrote a book. I can't remember the name of the book off the top of my head, but I was reading it once, and I was listening to it while I was driving. I don't read when I drive. I do Audible when I drive, and just to be clear. I do a lot of things I shouldn't do, like eat cereal when I drive, but I don't read. Like, no fear. Unless there's a bridge. We were talking about that earlier. I've never been over the Jordan Bridge. Please kill me if I ever try. That's scary. But there are going to be times in your life when bad things happen. Andy Andrews wrote in his book a story. There was an old man. He was mentoring a young man who was a street kid who didn't have a job, reliable job, and he was trying to mentor him into understanding outcomes and how to make choices. And so it's like midnight. It's cold. The kid has one set of clothes, and he's wearing them. And they're walking past a pool outside a hotel along the beach, and the old man just suddenly reaches over and pushes the kid in the pool. Freezing cold water. The kid comes out sputtering and angry. So why'd you do that? And he says, I was just trying to show you that there are going to be times in your life people are going to push you in the pool. How you come up and how you react to it is your choice. Well, in your marriage, unfortunately, sometimes your spouse is going to push you in the pool. Mike, for those of you who know Mike, he's a friend of mine, goes to church here. He says in the military, they say sometimes people are going to punch you in the face. Well, I think it's nicer to be pushed in the pool than punched in the face. So I'm using my example because he wanted me to use the punch in the face. Sometimes your spouse is going to push you in the pool. Maybe he or she had a bad day. Maybe the kids stood on their last nerve. Maybe there's a financial crisis. Something's going on, and the mood is bad, the energy's bad, the feelings are bad, whatever you want to say. And you come home and your spouse lays into you, and suddenly you feel victimized. That's what pushing in the pool basically means. You feel like you've been victimized. This isn't fair. I did nothing, and you're taking it out on me. And if you've never had your spouse take something out on you, either you're not paying attention or you're married to a saint. Because we always take stuff out on the people closest to us because it's safe. We know they're not going to leave us, so we'll be mean. We'll be abusive to our family. We'll be polite to a stranger because it's safe to be abusive to your family in a lot of cases. So what comes next is up to you. So he explains to the young man, he says, well, you can come up angry and swinging. You can come up frustrated and confused. You can come up laughing and amused. However you come out of the water, though, that choice is yours to make, and the action you take will follow it. So think in advance. How do I want to come up out of the water when my spouse pushes me in the pool? Because it's going to happen. It's going to be a bad day. There's going to be a disagreement. There's going to be a misunderstanding. You're going to, if you're a guy, you're going to forget stuff. You're going to make a mess. It's just going to happen. It's not that we can't think. We just don't care enough to think sometimes. And I mean that sincerely. Men don't think about all the things women think about. Not that we don't love our wives or our family or the outcomes, because we think about one thing at a time. We have a hard time thinking about everything at the same time. If you've never seen Mark Gunger's seminar on The Tale of Two Brains, it's on YouTube. Watch it. It's hilarious, and it's absolutely true. So there are going to be days when your spouse is going to push you in the pool. Sometimes your kids will do it. Okay? You have to decide in advance how you're going to react. That's what the chosen marriage is about. It's thinking about the outcomes that you want, thinking about the obstacles in the way, thinking about the standards you're going to want to put in place. So if your wife pushes you in the pool, you could just say, wow, honey, sounds like you've had a really rough day. Tell me more about it. I learned this from my mentor way back when I first started therapeutic foster care. I had these wonderful kids that I wanted to kill. I never wanted to kill a child before. I've been in youth ministry for 10 years before I started foster care. I never wanted to kill a kid in youth ministry. But when they lived in my house, I wanted to kill them all. And I wanted it to be slow and painful sometimes. Because they would do stuff that was awful to me, to my wife. There's no reason for it. And I went to Randy one day and says, I can't do this anymore. These kids are horrible. He goes, well, you knew they were horrible. I said, yeah, but I didn't know they were that horrible. They're saying things to me. I have to go to a local sailor and ask him to tell me what that word means. Because I don't know what it means. They're creative. And he says, you're doing it all wrong. What do you mean I'm doing it wrong? He says, you're not understanding. Because they were pushing me in the pool. He said, you're doing such a great job that these kids trust you enough to say and do the things they could never get away with their own parents. If they said those things to their dad, what do you think would happen to them? I had one kid that got set on fire by a father when she was like 7. He set her on fire. Okay? But they could say and do things to me they could never say and do to their parents because they trusted me, because they knew I wasn't going to hurt them. So he says, you need to realize when they say those horrible things, I won't repeat any of them, I don't want to burst into flames up here. What they're really saying is, I trust you not to hurt me. I trust you not to push back. I trust you to hold my pain with me. He called it being a practice parent, and I've been preaching practice parent ever since. So when little Johnny would come up and he would tell me, how to do things to my body that were biologically impossible, I would say, wow, Johnny, you're having a big feeling. Tell me some more. Wow, Johnny, thank you for telling me. Hey, Johnny, can you tell me some more really cool cuss words? Can you yell louder than that? I want you to yell even louder. Of course, he'd yell louder, and I said, oh, that you could do better than that. Yell louder. He'd yell louder one more time. No, yell more. And no. And he didn't want to do what I said. So that was what's what we call a paradoxical intervention in counseling. But I learned that when my foster kids pushed me in the pool, that the reaction that I had coming out of the pool was mine, not his. And so I could say, this is a window of therapeutic opportunity. Fancy thing, you can say that in your marriage. Well, you say, Jim, Kathy, I want you to practice this. Jim, that is a window of therapeutic opportunity. Let's talk about it. You write that down. Kathy's a brainiac, so and so is Jim for that matter, so he'll probably thwart her. Okay, so what's next? I threw a lot at you. If your spouse keeps pushing you in the pool, and that's the biggest problem you have right now, and you don't think that you're going to be able to make any major changes because your spouse has reacted or because it's too much hurt, and you keep getting thrown in the pool, I have a free handout for you. It goes with our marriage refriending seminar, which is coming up in a few months. If you can capture that QR code, do it. If you can't, it's on the website. If you can't find it on the website, send me an email. I'll give it to you. It's free. It's just a little booklet that gives you 4 power convictions that tell you how to react when you get pushed in the pool. Very simple. Don't have time to go through it. It's a long teaching. But the little booklet will tell you what you need to know. We are going to have Q&A in just a minute before Brenda gets mad at me, because I promised I'd be done about 8:10, and I'm 11 minutes behind. But before we do that, I want to let you know, I threw it all at you fast. And I wanted you to hear the basic ideas behind this, because this is an important first step in making your marriage a great outcome marriage. But you have to unpack it. And if you're like me, people get up on the stage and they tell you all these little metaphors and analogies and little quips. You go, yeah, but how do I do it? So it's really hard to walk some of this stuff out. Some of you are going to take the information I gave you and go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. We're going to go home and do that. And great if you can. And a lot of you can. But if you want to walk it out, we have an option. So like I said, we're going to pack a lot of therapy into these seminars so that you don't have to spend years doing therapy. We're looking at about 150 hours worth of therapy we packed into these 7 different topics. And the way we're doing it is we're giving the seminar to give you the overview. And then for those who want to walk it out, we have a master class. I call it an after group. And it's going to be online. It's 4 weeks. You sign up. It's a nominal fee. And you get the materials, you get some extra video instruction, you get the PowerPoint from this, you get all that stuff. But then we have 4 live process groups where you can meet with me on Zoom in a group and talk about, okay, we tried this and we're struggling with that, or we tried this at work, but it didn't work here, and we can walk you through it. And I'm hoping that you'll understand that that's an opportunity it works out to be like $7 per therapeutic hour that you're going to be doing rather than $100 and something. So it's really cheap. And we want to get as many people to do as possible. Now, we are limited in the amount of space we have because we're doing a Zoom group and we want to connect. So I'm hoping if you're interested in learning more and figuring out how to walk this out with myself and with some of our coaches, that hopefully will be available as well. But definitely I'll be there. The class actually opens up on the 12th of May, and the first group is on May 18th. And you can go to that URL, or Brenda passed out, or the ladies passed out some little QR code cards. That'll take you to the page, and I've been updating it. The registration should be available as of today. That'll take you to that. site if you sign up. We're limited in the amount of people we can have, so don't wait till the 12th because it'll probably be full. If we end up with a surge of people, we'll do a second group. The group is scheduled for Thursday night at 7 o'clock for 4 weeks. We try to make it short so you wouldn't be giving up too much of your nighttime. So that's the culture of the chosen marriage. That's the beginning. We have 6 more topics that all tie together, and we're going to be doing them in a specific order to give you all the main tools that I teach people throughout years of marriage counseling. Most people do marriage counseling for 2 or 3 years. I don't know if you know that. To get this stuff figured out, to get the marriage they want, and we're trying to get it all into a written form and a video form. We're taping this. Eventually, it'll end up being a podcast so that we can get it out there.